considered. I guess you could throw cross country in there.
Yeah.
You'll like this. UTEP men had 10 titles between the 5,000 and 10,000. I think this is Wisconsin has won a lot. As you mentioned, Susie Faber Hamilton et al. Arizona's won a bunch. But I think this goes down to 4 teams: Arkansas, Oregon, Villanova, and Stanford.
Yeah, I feel that this is another Oregon Villanova type of a situation, and obviously Arkansas is close there. I would throw out Stanford just because I think that they have in my opinion the weakest case, although they do have plenty of women's titles. I mean, the temptation, because they have the names, and I know Villanova's been there. The temptation for me is to go to Oregon, but I could definitely hear the argument for Villanova. They've had so many, as you were just pointing out in the 1500 section of this. They've had a lot of big names, and it extends out into the 5,000 when you talk about, as you were mentioning, Jen Rhines just a moment ago. They've had a lot of bodies, and then on the men's side, they had Pat Tiernan recently winning cross country in 2016. I mean, if someone's gonna, if you ask somebody right now who's aged 20 to 40, they're gonna say who's been the best distance program of all time without looking it up in the NCAA. I think most people are gonna choose Oregon. I could be wrong there. You might get some Arkansas in there, but if you go 40 to 60, people are going to say Villanova. And so this falls upon what year you were born and what era you came up in. Because my era, no question, it's Oregon. And maybe some of that is Nike's influence, right? I mean, I remember learning about Steve Prefontaine because somebody that played on our soccer team had a shirt that said pre-libs. And I'm like, what is pre-libs? What does that mean? And that's how I first learned about him. And Nike's done better in the marketing department of marketing their stars. And obviously Oregon has had Edward Cheserek recently. And then, a little bit before that, they had Galen Rupp. And before that, they obviously had Steve Prefontaine, other names in between. So I think this falls upon how old you are, because if you look at the numbers, Villanova should, maybe has an edge. But it's just all about.
Well, also it breaks down. Gender-wise, it breaks down pretty strongly too, because Villanova 14 women's titles in the 5 and the 10, only 2 men's titles in those events, and then they had 9. They have nine women's team titles in cross country. The men only have 4. Okay. But that's far ahead of Oregon, who only has 2 women's titles individually and then 4 cross-country titles. So you could say Nova is the women's view. I know we didn't want to break it apart like that. For the men, though, you got to throw Arkansas in there because you're talking about Arkansas with 11 men's cross-country titles. Although Oregon on the track, 10 5K titles and 4 10K titles. Stanford is pretty balanced in there as well, too, with 10 men or 10 women, 8 men, and then 5 women's cross and 4 men's cross. Like, that's a pretty good distribution.
I think of Stanford recently. I don't think of the machine years. I think of recently, where it's close but no cigar. I know they got Grant Fisher winning a title and Sean McGorty, but I more associate them with getting close in cross country on the team side, and then finishing. I think Grant Fisher finishing runner up behind Morgan McDonald several times, and so I have to check my era and check my bias towards recency, or else you forget about how good some of these schools have been in the not too distant past.
Okay, so you're picking UTEP for that one, is that right?
UTEP for the distance? No.
Yeah, 10 men's titles. No. Okay.
No. I'm actually going to go with Oregon. I'm going to go with.
You're going with Oregon here.